So I guess we'll kind of jump right in. We'll jump right into the questions. Bob, does telemarketing work in the MSP space?
Absolutely does. The reason people use telemarketing is they find that they cannot keep the pipelines filled with just pure inbound strategies. The inbound strategies are great and they actually help in the cold calling. So they have to say, well, if I want to be a little bit more proactive, what do I do? Well, if you want to be proactive, you got to get someone that will pick up the phone and aggressively go after a list of folks that you'd like to speak with. But it
Yeah,
absolutely works, and we see it every day. We have
it's
hundreds of folks, using our software, making a difference in their revenue stream.
it's spot on, and it's like I love how you said the inbound gets you to a point, right? Like we just added telemarketing. Once we were really far into growing, I wish we would have done it maybe a little sooner, to be honest. But like people, a lot of MSPs would be like, "Oh, I'm just going to have a caller all day," and it's like you can't just do that either. Like you can't just do the inbound marketing. You can't just do the caller thing. Like they complement each other so well. So where it's like, okay, you got a good marketing machine going. You want to add calling on top of that. So MSPs that are listening that are maybe new into their marketing, don't just start with telemarketing, right? You need to add telemarketing into your overall mix. And for those more mature MSPs that are like, okay, I do want to move to the next step, well, don't have your salesperson that's very highly paid doing calls all day. It's not efficient for them to do it. Have a dedicated telemarketer like we do it, right? You can have multiple telemarketers all pointed at setting that appointment for your closer. And don't have your farmer do it either. Bob, is all that kind of correct with the having dedicated telemarketer usually? Is that what you would recommend?
It is. It is what we
Okay.
recommend, and it's really like one of the reasons to do it is kind of like any job. The more that you do it, the better that you get at it, and it's such a unique skill set. It's different from what your field reps that run appointments. It's different from their skill set. So a dedicated appointment setter can get really good at it, and you'll see more productivity per call in the long run with a dedicated resource.
100%. And one of the things you said in the beginning was like it's physically hard sometimes. Like
Oh
it's,
God.
and when I was calling early on, I was the sales marketing account and cold caller. And like what was on the last thing on my list to do was calling. So I would put anything in front of that, like, oh yeah, I better get onto that admin thing I need to do, right? Like I was always being productive, but calls always hit the bottom of my list.
Yeah.
So having someone where it's like, this is your only job and being transparent when you're hiring them, this is your job. You are going to be making X number of calls, which we'll get into specific metrics and all that. It just keeps it focused. And so someone isn't just putting that at the bottom of their list.
Yeah, that's exactly right because it's true. You will put a root canal before you will put sitting down on and making calls if you're a field rep. That's
Yep.
just the nature of the beast. It's the least favorite part of the job, but it's also the most important part of the sales cycle. You know, if your sales cycle starts when someone reaches to you, then
Mm.
that's going to be inconsistent. But if you can use metrics to understand if I make this many calls, I can expect this many conversations. Out of this many conversations, I can expect this many appointments. Now you've got someone that's going to run those appointments. That's where you really want someone that's really focused on how to run an appointment.
Yep. Spot
That's what you
on.
need. Yeah,
That's a
dedicated.
great point. Yep.
Now they don't have to be full time either. A lot of my
Mm.
customers in the MSP world, they've run through the referrals. They've gotten all the referral business they can get, and they've done their AdWords, and so they feel like they got a nice marketing base. But they still would like to see if they can supercharge feeding the pipeline. They'll get a part-time caller.
Yep.
They'll start to work on what their process should be, how many times to call, et cetera. And then once they get a part-time person doing it, and it looks like they've nailed it, then they can then make that a full-time person. Some people add a second part-time person. I mean, so there's a lot of strategies, but the key is you have to decide what it is that's going to make your business successful from an appointment setting point of view. Lock that in, and then whoever sits in front of that and operates it, that's a totally separate decision.
That's such an excellent point, and especially with contact science, so much of it is plug and play. The campaigns
Yep.
are in there, the scripts are in there. It's just finding the right person and then some good coaching. Totally spot on. And then just anecdotally, or I guess as an example, Alltech splits a caller with another one person in our peer group. So we only have
Mm-hmm.
a part-time caller with another MSP. And so all it took was us going to a peer in our peer group and saying, hey, do you want to split a caller? And they're like, sure, we'll cut salary. And boom, now we both have a part-time caller and it's adding revenue, right? Not as much of as a full-time caller, but again, we're doing all the other things too. And eventually we're both going to have full-time callers. So you're spot on. Like, it doesn't have to be a full-time caller. And actually we'll get into some ways with our partnership that works too. So you kind of already mentioned that with kind of different strategies and stuff, but with this question is, what are your most successful partners doing to get the most out of telemarketing?
So that's a great question because telemarketing has a number of moving parts. It's probably the most straightforward business process that you would ever put in your MSP. There's just not a lot of complexity to it, but there is a number of very specific moving parts. But the most important part is an engaged manager that's willing to spend maybe an hour and 15 minutes a week actually meeting with and going through how well the process is working with their appointment setter. So that's
Yep.
probably the most critical element, is the realization that I'm actually putting in a business process, and you get lots of them that run our businesses, but this is just another business process.
Yep.
Typically, it's got one person that's doing it, so it's not like you have a group of techs that can compare notes with each other. So that one person needs a manager that will sit down and just do some basic review every single week. And if you
Yep.
do that, you'll win. That's what we say our most successful folks doing, is the management is engaged and they view their calling resource as what they are, and that is the process operator. So
Yep.
let's work with them to operate this process as well as we can.
That's such good advice. And like, we're doing good with it. Like we've added, much more than, what the caller costs, but I'm like, we could be doing better. And I like the scripts and everything we're doing. And like, I'm dropping the ball right there, what you just said. Like, I need to spend more time with the call. Like we Teams chat and stuff, but I need to set like a weekly cadence with them. Like, let's go over the calls. Like, let's really like dive into this. And I'm not currently doing that because I'm like, it's kind of working. It's working. It's bringing MRR, but like it could be so much more. It could be so much better if I was a more engaged manager. So I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna take that a piece of advice and make sure I act on it. So that's great advice, Bob.
Well, we've got some new documents that help managers. We're starting to do a little bit more focus on answering the question, okay, Bob, I buy that, but how do I actually do that? So we've got some step-by-step advice that we just give out, give little documents to. So
I was actually reviewing that today with Steven over at the other peer group that's using contact science, the other people in our peer group, and we were loving it. We're like, we really need to we're meeting up with next week in Vegas for our peer group meeting, and it's like we need to sit down and really review this together, because now that we're both doing telemarketing, all three of us doing telemarketing, we're getting really engaged with improving it. So I'm glad you sent me that. I appreciate that, Bob. Yeah. And if you want, we could throw that on MSP Camp for members. So it's up to you. We can talk about it later, but it's a great advice. It's great piece of advice.
It'll be there. We'll put it there.
Awesome.